Welcome to the Missionaries podcast. Stories from the mission field for everyone, for you to listen, learn, and enjoy. Your hosts for today are Martin and Esther.
And welcome everybody to this new podcast. This time the topic is Pastors' Kids, aka PKs, aka Missionary Kids. And we want to say welcome to our special guest of today, Joseph. Joseph, welcome.
Thank you.
Joseph, just for a short intro, who are you and what are you doing here?
Yeah, who am I? That's a very philosophical question. My name's Joseph, obviously. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I came to Poland to study initially. And fast forward, I started working with Homeland Security here, and then I've recently changed jobs to work for a bank. So my professional life, let's say, is in communications, innovation, management, and on the other side of things, outside of career, I am a life learner. I think that's the best description to myself. I enjoy learning from experiences, my own and others, and just the joy of life itself that God has blessed us with. Yeah, that's about it.
In all honesty, that's quite a change from Zimbabwe all the way to Poland.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
What was the hardest thing?
The hardest thing?
Yeah.
Was the food. And initially the weather, but I've come accustomed to it. But the food, yeah, it does not taste like food. it's more like you just get used to the taste because you have to eat to survive. But I mean, talk about fresh food, right? Like vegetables and fruits, it's completely different. The taste is just I think not. It's almost like a revelation when you finally eat food from home. Like I'm going home next week, and it's that's definitely one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to. So, yeah, I think food was the biggest thing.
Hey,
yeah.
And you're actually you're actually a PK, as in pastor's kid, huh?
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting. I did a little bit of research online. There is actually not a lot about pastor's kids online, which is and the stuff that is online is actually not that great.
Yeah.
I found a couple of books about pastor's kids. Well, they're not the best books, to say the least. They talk about being raised as a pastor kid, totally done with it, done with the church, even done with their parents. So that's not that wasn't very encouraging.
I think that's more the grim end of the spectrum to the PK's life, Yeah.
Yeah, so that was quite something to stumble upon. Let's just keep it with that. I also looked up in the Bible, are there any examples in the Bible about pastors or missionary kids? Well, they were not so encouraging as well. There's in 1 Samuel 2, in verse 12, Eli's sons were scoundrels, they had no regard for the Lord. In verse 17, the sin of the young man was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. Then I found, just think of David's children, particularly Amnon, Absalom, Solomon. Well, not exactly role models.
Exceptional.
Not really. And then again, I mean, and he had multiple wives, concubines, the whole shebang. So David's home life was also not exactly, not everything did go to plan. So that I found very interesting, that it's not. My first thought, if I look at the Bible, I'll find all sorts of examples from pastors' kids who are actually doing great.
Yeah.
But
not so much.
not so much. Yeah. So that was quite something. Just for the listeners, for the people at home, just to set the scene. I also looked up the leader's qualifications. Your parents were pastors.
Yeah.
And
Went through Bible school and all that.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Exactly.
And I looked it up in the Bible. If you look in the Bible, there are, through Paul, God has given us instructions on choosing godly men as elders or overseers or pastors, shepherds. And one of the primary qualifications is that the overseer must be married and have children who are saved, who are well managed, and who are under control. And that's quite a responsibility.
Indeed.
For your parents. I mean, if you look at 1 Timothy 3:4, and these are heavy verses, so I hope everybody's seating. The qualification of a leader, he must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? And then we have Titus 1:6, which is even more, it's pretty in your face. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe, and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. That's quite something.
That is, yeah. You can't add more to that. Like that's like, I see. I'm even speechless myself. Yeah.
I mean, that's quite some pressure. I mean, if that's what you'll have to do as a pastor, that's almost not human anymore.
Exactly.
On the other hand, I mean, let's be honest, it's there for a reason. They must be an example to the flock.
Right.
So yeah, I do get it why God through Paul gave us these Bible verses in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1:6. But still, I mean, it's quite something. And if you look at those Bible verses that we just talked about, Eli's sons, the sons of David, there is no guarantee that your kids will be perfect. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. And besides, it's like you have these verses. When you build a family, you don't foresee, like reiterating what you just said, you don't foresee what the life of your kids is going to turn out to be like, and they're supposed to be upright, obeying the law of the Lord as you are, as like the father or the head of the family. And I'm grateful to God that my parents have done a pretty good job, regardless of like what has happened along life, being the prodigal son and, finding your way back to the father. But that's besides the fact. I think it's a burden that not many people can or should carry. And it's honestly by God's grace that people can actually carry that weight, because you're not only leading your own family, but as a leader, as a pastor, you're leading the flock, like you said, like the sheep, right, in the church. And you're supposed to be that model who, as well, like you said, who is almost supposed to be like this impossible, perfect person who does not or should not exist in like humane terms, but with God's grace, it works out for those who are rightfully chosen.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, I mean, I can really feel the suspense or the pressure in the air.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, I hope God doesn't call me to be a pastor.
Tell me about it.
I mean, that's, and I mean, literally, oh God, please don't.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm trying to use bad words,
no,
but it's literally a call to God.
I resonate with it.
Yeah, and if he wants to, hey, I'm fine with it. I'm open for it. If that's what he wants, sure. But I definitely would need his blessing for that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think it'll be, I've definitely had this, like, maybe not phase, but like moments where the trajectory was almost like pointing towards, say, myself going in that direction as my parents being pastors. apart from like their own professional careers. And it was really like praying against that, you know, like God, please no, like I don't want this, not me being in a place where I'm running away or I'm trying to run away from my calling, but just like knowing what you carry, you have to, like the weight, I don't want to call it a weight because it's a blessing to be leading in the church as well, but you know, there's things that come with it that you have to carry, and that literally, even just like the scriptures you shared and the other nuances that you actually have to experience in life with so many diverse people in the church, in your family itself, and you're supposed to still stand on your own 2 feet. That's like, yeah, I'm going to serve, but don't give me that title. Like I will serve with my all, like wholeheartedly, but don't, no.
That's actually funny. I found a piece online that talks about pastors' kids. And just what I said, there are just a handful of articles about it, which is weird. I mean, there must be a gazillion pastors' kids and missionary kids, but there are just a handful of thingies on the weird wide interwebs. And one of the things that it says, what seize the opportunities coming your way. Mm-hmm. You grew up, you grow up in a pastor's family, and yet they will give you some skills that might be handy later on.
Right.
And one of the questions that I literally put down here, does it work like that? Is that a blessing? I mean, I'm not sure.
Neither am I.
No. So, yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is also a funny one. Let me try to find it. I put it down somewhere. Oh, there. I found one website. Well, I thought that I found one website that did say something to encourage pastors' kids.
Okay.
So I thought, yay, there is a website to encourage pastors' kids or missionary kids. Well,
I'm doubting the encouragements themselves.
Yeah, well, I found it on openbible.info, and it lists a couple of Bible verses for encouragement for pastors' kids. So get this.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Hebrews 13:17. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that will be of no advantage to you.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound much like an encouragement. It sounds, yeah. No.
It sounds like more pressure. Huh?
Exactly. It's like you already have that pressure to live up to a certain standard as a pastor's kid, and now it's like more pressure and just like overthinking and just like, okay, now it's like ultimately no hope, you know. And I feel like actually a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times because I don't have any statistics on this, but I think oftentimes people, even particularly pastors' kids, right? You get to a point where you almost lose hope because it feels like a hopeless situation where your parents are under a spotlight. They have their responsibilities. My parents were like marriage counselors, or they still are. Pastors, maybe not so much. They're serving in the church still, and then like just helping out, like when there's events like weddings, funerals, etc. And they're like, you know, this picture of like the ideal couple. Obviously they have grown with each other together, issues, whatever, they dealt with it, whatever. But like it's been the role model of a couple that follows Christ and leads the flock. And then you as a kid, Joseph, is like, okay, I've grown up as a Christian. I was literally like, I remember in like primary school, like praying with people and like, you know, trying to like lead them to Christ. And then like that like fire kind of like started running out where it was like, okay, you're now essentially under like a third party spot. You're under the spotlight as like a third party, you know, and it's like whatever move you make, it's going to reflect on your parents, on your family name, on you as a kid. And it's like, as a 12-year-old, as a 16-year-old, like what am I supposed to do with that? you know? So the ultimate, or I would say, at least in my case, the first reaction is, okay, I don't want to be part of this because it's just causing me like lack of peace, you know? And
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, how do you deal with that? That is a good.
That's a good one.
It's like I'm talking about it now, but when I had to deal with it, I didn't have any manuscript, to follow, or this wasn't like anything that was talked about in my family. If anything, it was more pressure from my parents to like be spick and span and like uphold that image, and it's like I am trying to, and I don't know. It's just I don't think there's any. Literally, I think the prime example is how you found so few articles on like being a pastor's kid, or there's not so much being talked about it, and it's like,
but it is a topic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely a topic.
Yeah, and it's like how can you not talk, even the pastors themselves, or just I don't know, maybe it's just maybe not necessarily stigmatized or just like undermined, but this is something very relevant, particularly to kids who are growing in that environment.
If you let's ask Esther. Esther, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Esther.
Hey, well, as we're also running a missionary retreat, and well, it's also one of the things that we stumbled upon every now and then with pastors' kids or missionary kids. Well, you should be the specialist from a therapy point of view. And she's smiling at me right now. If you don't handle that well as a kid, what do you see as a therapist? What happens?
Well, I think you can go two ways. One way is like, I am against it. I'm fighting you in every way. I'll do what I want to do, and I'm not being told what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think the other way is like trying everything you can to be the person that they are expecting you to be. But the danger in that, like Joseph, he's pointing at himself. That's me.
Yep. Ding, ding.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You have the experience, not me.
Great.
And the danger of adapting all the time is that you don't have the freedom to experiment and to play and to figure out life the way you supposed to do when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
And what does happen if you don't have the freedom to do that? What are the outcomes of it?
Well, they can be very different. I mean, every person is different and will deal with it, but everyone will find a way to cope with it.
Do they? Does everyone find a way?
Well, hopefully they do.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, we all. I'm not going to say this is a trauma. That's too well. If everything goes okay, it won't be a trauma. But if you don't handle it well, it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, we sometimes really see kids go off the rails completely. Those kids don't go off the rails because they handled it well. You see what I mean? Or my wife is looking at me like I'm talking gibberish. But
no.
Hey, I'm trying.
No, I agree with both of you more. But this was almost like straight to the T, like that description. And I was the person who's trying to adapt and try to almost like suppress myself in the midst of having to live up to this certain image or like role as a pastor's kid. And I think this was when you start getting exposed to things that you're supposed to learn about in that time where you feel like you're suppressed, you can easily just go haywire, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, like now this is like shock because you've been living as a pastor's kid who is perfect, or or perfect and whatever, which is not no human being is perfect, but you're putting this pressure on a child who then thinks that, oh wait, this is what I should live up to, and there's no room for mistakes. And then when you start seeing people making mistakes, or you get in an environment where there's more than just like the Christianity or life, like you're now living life. It's now, oh, okay, you can easily jump into the deep end of experimenting, and now I don't know, getting into alcohol, drugs, meeting people. And sometimes it's not even like the wrong people. It's people in that same Christian community who have not been, say, as constrained to live like this perfect life, and then you opening your eyes to say, oh, wait a minute, there's more, but now you're like, I'm scared. I don't know if I should like enter those uncharted territory, that uncharted territory or not. Like how I'll give an example. So I got to high school, and I actually ended up, like, one of my best friends. We were like best friends for like 2 years, like off like high school is like 6 years, and we're like best friends from like the end of the second year until like the fourth year. And she's Muslim. She was Muslim, and we got to a point where like all our classmates were like, dude, you guys should just like get together, because like you basically act like you're in a relationship, although it wasn't like, overly like emotional or whatever. It's just like high school lovey-dovey type of thing. And then we ended up getting together. But before we did, this is something that I still think about until today. Some of my friends had almost like tried to hook me up. Maybe not hook me up, but like, yeah, like they introduced me to like one girl who was going to another church. She was also a PK. So it was almost like we resonated on a lot of things. She was also in like the music, what's it called, praise and worship. I was serving in praise and worship. And it was like, you had common ground, right? And then now I had this best friend who I've been friends with for quite a while. She is not necessarily Christian, but like we have a good relationship together, and then it got to a point where I essentially had to choose, and I chose the best friend who's Muslim, who is like not, we don't have that foundation together in like the church community, etc. And ever since then, it almost feels like, I don't want to say like it's been like a trend, but like it feels like this detachment from being in like that kind of a relationship with a Christian, for instance. And it's like, I never talked with my parents, still don't know unless they listen to this podcast.
Now they do.
Yeah, perhaps. But it's like I never got to talk to them. I only told, I think, my brother and my other my sisters. They know about it, but like talking to my parents about it, in my head, going to church in the church service, see my dad preaching about unequal yokeness, and I am in a relationship with a Muslim girl. That was like, he better not find out. Like yeah.
On the other hand, I mean, as long as you're a kid, I always imagine it like, as long as you're a child, your parents are some sort of umbrella to protect you from God's wrath, I guess. You're safe through your parents as long as you're a kid.
Right.
But there comes an age where you have to make your own choices.
Indeed.
And you also have to make your own choices as a Christian.
Yeah.
And that not only goes for you as a PK, but also goes for everyone.
Indeed, yeah.
But it doesn't, well, it does give some more pressure, I guess, with questions like that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something, Joseph?
Good.
You said you were the kid who tried his best to follow the parents and their teachings and how they would like you to be. How did you develop your own self in this situation?
Yeah, I don't think I entirely did. I think there was a huge remnants of like being so it's it's okay. I'll give an additional bit of background. So my brother is exactly 2 years older than me. We went to the same preschool, primary school, high school, etc. He was, and I mean, it doesn't help that we share the same birthday, and we also used to look alike. So we're like twins from like 2 years apart. But like in primary school, it was almost like always like competition. Not competition, but it was always like comparison. Like I was the younger one who was following my brother's footsteps. So it's like he becomes captain of primary school. I was vice captain. He got the best points in primary school. I got the third best points. He got more A's than I did at O levels. And I got like 1A and a chain of B's, even though he got like C's and D's. But the fact that he had more A's was like, you got less A's. And then he became school captain for high school. And at that point, I was like, no, I'm not even going to apply to become captain, because it was like literally the same team. They were calling me my brother's name, Josh, Joseph. They were mixing it up. And it was just like, I felt like two shadows down, living under the shadow of my brother and the shadow of my parents. And it's like, this is like, even like talking about it, I'm realizing I never talked about this so much with anyone. And it's like, I'm like a teenager. I'm having to deal with this by myself to learn how to navigate real life. And this is like, things that I learned when I got older, that like, you experience these things that become traumatic and like live with you for the rest of your life. And it's like, nobody told me about it when I was a kid, and like now it's too late, or maybe not too late. God has like continued to work with me and in me, and just like navigating, better ways to like deal with certain things. But it's like you almost, like, back to your question. It's like, to a certain extent, it was like I am me through my parents and like my brother. So I don't want to use, for lack of a better term, their position implicates me. So I am like a leader because my brother was a leader. I am supposed to be the perfect kid because my parents were leading church, and nobody knew about my girlfriend who was a Muslim. So I'm kind of covered, even though like I'm like living, it was almost like living a double life, and then I think until today, I'm still really figuring out who I am, or like I know who I am in God. I know like my career path, all of that stuff, but it's still like it's molding that person who I should have learned about molding a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I thought of is, if you realize that as a missionary's kid or a pastor's kid, you're also a sinner. You also make mistakes. You're not better. I mean, Romans 3:10 and 3:23 apply to you as well as for the rest of us. Well, nobody's perfect. So yeah, do cut yourself some slack, I guess.
Right.
And I guess that should be normal to say that. It's kind of weird to say that, I guess, to your own kid. Yeah. Don't worry, you'll make mistakes, you'll sin, but don't worry about your well, that's...
It's like, I can't, like, I start to preach about it, but don't worry.
That's the thing. But there is something in it, I guess. You're human, just as everybody else in the church.
Yeah.
So yeah, you'll make mistakes and you'll fall. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing weird about it.
Yeah. And talking about I think it's well, I'm from Zimbabwe, and it's like, I guess, culturally ingrained, where when you go to church, it's like it's black and white. There's no gray. There's no, like, it's like drinking is equal to drunkenness. There's no social drinking like here, or although like oftentimes it's like it's the same. But anyway, there's no. It's just like, people preach about grace. It's like a very firm faith where it's like, repent of your sins and like, otherwise you face condemnation. Even though like we still preach about grace, and like, you know, even like remembering like my parents' sermons, it's like, yeah, we were talking about grace, but it wasn't. There was some conversations that I never had because the assumption was there that we like I can't actually. Can I actually have that conversation? Can I talk to my parents about being unequally yoked and I'm dating a like Muslim girl?
Could it be? I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption, but could it be that it would have helped if somebody would say to you, "Hey, guess what? I'm not your dad. I'm not your mom.
Yeah.
But if you've got questions like that, just come to me, and we'll just act like we never spoke.
Yeah.
We never talked to each other.
Yeah.
But just feel free to say whatever you want,
Mm-hmm.
to give you some sort of space, I guess, for, in all honesty, tough conversations."
That would have been amazing. Like, I think also even between my siblings, I don't think, or maybe myself and my brother, we could talk about some things, and then my sister, I don't know about them, but it's like the unspoken things. Like, it's just like, you just know, or you think you know that this conversation doesn't go. Like, we don't talk about this. Like, if you have to deal with it, like, figure it out, buddy. Like, I don't know. Like, or try to find someone who you know might be, even if you try to find someone who you know is going through the same thing, you overthink because you don't know if you can still talk about it, even if they've dealt with it. And it's like, all of this like unknowns and like just like you don't even know what's going on, and now you just like, I don't know, so you just let it go. Like, you let it go, and like, I don't know, maybe you suffer, maybe you don't, I don't know.
I guess trust is a big thing in that as well. Like, who can you trust? Will they tell your parents?
Yep.
So what would have helped you in this time when you are developing?
Great. I think, like, the transparency of, like, even when you talk about grace, right? Like, you, Martin, you mentioned, like, everyone is a sinner. Everyone is a sinner. Even the pastor who's sharing that the scripture is a sinner. And having that, like, accountability to say that, hey, like, we're all sinners here. Like, everyone who's coming to church is imperfect. Like, there's no point to come to church if you're perfect, right? Like, you're not, only Jesus is perfect. And then, like, having that open environment where obviously you don't want to condone sin, right? It's like, like Paul says, how much longer shall you abuse God's grace? Because, you know, it's always there. It's always prevalent. But it's having this environment that is like, hey, feel comfortable to wear ripped jeans or not always be good. You can be sad. You can be like sick and just be like, I don't want to go to church today. Like, literally, it's not a problem. I appreciate my mom's effort to like keep us in like the church community, but it was like every Sunday. if she hears this, I'm sorry, Mama. But it was like, it was like moments. Sometimes you finish school, like you start 7:30, finish at 5, and you have like a soccer game. There's a prayer meeting on Friday from like, was it 6 to 7, and you still have to go there. Like, you're a teenager having to go through this. But it's also like, you know, my mom would always use this for, I think she's like, it's probably one of her favorite verses: train up a child in the way he should go, so that he will not depart from it when he is older. And I think that's it. If you mix that with this gracious environment, that's ultimate. Like, if you train, it's like, the conditioning experiment. You condition a person to be subject to a certain thing. So like, every time I take a water bottle or from the fridge, I have to ask you, and I'll always ask you, or whoever it is, whenever, like, if I visit my friend's house and I want to get water, I'm gonna ask out of courtesy, not even like, okay, I feel like, but it's like, I've learned something good, something, like, even if they don't appreciate it in the way that I see value in it, I'm still gonna do it. But if it's like, hey, like, I'm gonna hit you if you take a bottle without asking. Now there's like this trauma to it, you know. Now it's like, okay, I'll drive. Like, if I go to my friend's place, it's not even my family. I'm not even gonna ask for water. I'm just gonna faint if it's like a freaking hot day, you know. And it's like you have two different environments now, like one gracious environment and one environment where it's just like abide, like do this, do that, like, you know, religion over faith, right? Like, okay, that's maybe not a best example, but having that environment changes everything.
Talking about environment, one thing I found on the Weird Wide interwebs is that they said you have a great, you have an incredible team of supporters. And with supporters, they mean your church family. And I was like, I do agree they should be an incredible team of supporters. Mm-hmm. But I doubt that they always are.
Yeah.
Just looking at myself. I mean...
Yeah. We'll talk subjectively here anyway. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's two parts to it, where it's like there's some people who genuinely want to support you, and they're like, you know, we can talk, come hang out, whatever, and then you can easily find people who will point out that flaw in you when you do the thing, whatever the thing is. And it's like you mentioned, Esther, it's about trust, right? Who can you trust? You assume that the church environment is full of trustworthy people. No, not so much. I mean, it's the blatant truth. Like, just because you go to church doesn't make you any more perfect, right? And it's probably the most important place to actually have that support. If you're not going to go wayward, like that's the ultimate place. When we talk about having people coming to like church, inviting new people get saved, what other community are they going to get that influence that keeps them walking alongside God? Like, that's like, the church has to do that. Like, talking about follow-ups, you know, like there's, even, I'm not going to name any churches, but I used to go to a church where it was more like, you just come to church, you get saved, maybe like you get saved today, and like all of a sudden you're already joining like a team to serve in. And I appreciate the sentiment to keep them in that community to serve, but it's like this person does not even understand like what's going on still, and now they're being asked to do this, and then you see them leaving church, and it's like nobody bothers to like reach out to find out like, hey, are you okay? Like, I haven't seen you in like 2 weeks. What's up? You know?
Isn't it also about, well, how should I describe it? Maybe lowering your expectations about stuff that goes on in the church. I mean, just what you said, everybody who's in the church is also a sinner. We all are. Mm-hmm. So it'll never be perfect. But if you always expect everyone in the church to be Christ-like and understanding, yeah, well, you're setting yourself up for a huge disappointment.
Indeed.
So yeah, a part of it goes to the members in church, how they talk to you, how they treat you, I guess.
Yeah.
On the other hand, maybe one way to deal with it is maybe lower your expectations and be very clear about it. Hey, they're also sinners. They make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if your expectations as a pastor's kid are too high, it will always be a failure, I guess.
Yeah. Like on the same point, I've had to learn that myself. Like, to be like lowering expectations, just like, I don't want to, well, let's say lowering your expectations, right? It's like you don't expect to solve people's problems. Neither should they expect to solve yours, or whichever goes first. But it's it's one of those things that I've learned myself. Like, it wasn't like, okay, somebody told me or whatever. It was from experiences that I've had with other people where it's like, yeah, maybe I can't entirely depend on them, or maybe I can't entirely share what I feel with them. So with that, I'm not going to expect someone else to take on my weight in its entirety. I will evaluate, okay, I can share this much, and then the rest, maybe there's someone else I can like share with, or it's just something that I'll leave to God, or like work myself through it, you know. And it's I think it's only human. You can only carry so much yourself, let alone carrying someone else's burden, right? So you can't put that expectation on someone else. And I mean, it's almost ridiculous to do that. But once again, this is something that I've had to learn myself. Like, there was no guidance for that, you know. Like, and by guidance, I don't even mean, okay, let's test it out. Scenario 1. Do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. No, it's like, hey, like, you know, sometimes you're just a chat, like, with, I don't know, your uncle or your dad, whatever. And it's like, sometimes there's going to be moments in life where you're dealing with something and you might not understand it now, but, you know, you might have to either find someone who's closer to you, who's not family, because family is far away, or, you know, ultimately give it to God, which is definitely the biggest blessing that I've received from my like parents, you know, talking about like taking on something else, just knowing that God is there above all else. Like, anxiety, my mom, she always says, don't fret, but she says it in Shona. It's like, usatombo freta, which is like, don't even fret. And she says it with a smile. Like, the times that I recall, like, when I think about like how I'm anxious or like I'm worried about something, I always like remember her face glowing, saying, "Don't even worry." And it's like, how can you say don't even worry when like I am supposed to be worried right now, you know? And it's like, no, God is like telling you, don't worry about anything, what you're going to eat, what you're going to, it doesn't add anything to life. And like, you know, talking about this, like, this is something that I've grown up with, that I've taken heed of, and it's stayed with me until now. But now replicate that with all these other things. Maybe not everything you will learn by just like listening to your parents or being told by the church community, but these things will keep you steady, you know.
Hey, and as for me as a church member, person who is visiting a church, and that's a question actually for Esther and for you.
Right.
So think about it while I'm talking. What would help? What would help for me? What should I do as a church member, as a fellow Christian with pastors' kids or missionary kids? Is there anything that you would say, well, this would help? Or on the other side, definitely don't do this. This is not going to help at all. Is there anything that you might think of?
The first thing that pops in my head is be an honest person. Like, be honest about the struggles you have, be honest about stuff that goes on in life. Not everything is a golden path. And be there. Like, I think, and that's a question for you, like, you need to build trust if you really want to make a difference. So that will take an effort to getting to know the children and for them to be able to trust you. That's something for Joseph, I think, more to explain. But I think be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one.
Is it like, how should I explain this? Well, I do get it why people treat pastors and pastors' kids differently. They put them on some sort of pedestal sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
But in order to build some trust, you have to be on the same level. On the same human level.
Definitely. And giving that invitation, because it's not always easy for me as a pastor's kid to reach out as the person who is supposed to be holier than thou, whatever, and reach out to just like a regular church member and be like, hey, I am struggling. Like, you can only imagine what I expect them to, what I expect their reaction to be. Like, they're just gonna run to my parents and be like, oh my god, my gosh, this kid of yours is I don't know, having that environment, to always remembering that, we're honest Christians, all of us are flawed, and the fact that this person is even reaching out is they want to be, I don't want to say to be better because it sounds ridiculous, but they want to be in that, in line with God's word. They want to be walking with fellow people who are struggling together, and to struggle together, walking towards the same destination, which is heaven, right? And, or in relationship with Christ, obviously. But I still think it's challenging regardless. Thinking about being when I was younger, I don't recall any situation where I felt comfortable to talk about something unless someone else brought it up. And even then, I was very careful as to what I would say, and if I thought they might tell my parents or someone that I knew who would know my parents, and on and on and on, and it's we had groups of friends, right? Our parents were church leaders or in the same circle, and then we had kids who were together. It's I was typically the younger one in the group, and I recall having friends who, they made mistakes, and it was that mistake was put in the spotlight because of the role that their parents took on. And it would now feel like it's condemnation to the parent who is a pastor who did not keep their child in line. And it's condemnation to the kid who, again, gets the bigger burden, or maybe not the bigger burden, but a huge burden, because I've embarrassed my parents in front of all of these people who were looking to them for guidance, and looking at them as the leaders. And it's it doesn't end. It doesn't, don't be surprised if someone ends up committing suicide, because it's it becomes a weight on you that is come on. I've been trying, and then when I fail, it's even worse, and you guys are failing. Not to point fingers or anything, but it's everyone is spoiled to something. There's in some way they're working in some way, and it's you have to. It has to be that trustworthy, gracious environment that we're living in that supports each other regardless of those flaws, and holds each other to account for us to actually work out, Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to say to pastor parents that would make it easier for pastor kids to survive this environment?
Right. I'll definitely say realize the pressure that they're under. Whether you know it already or not, vocalize it. Tell your kids hey, we understand we're leading the church, and you're going to experience some pressure. Maybe you will, maybe not, but if you do, expect it, because people will look at you perhaps in a different way, because their expectation on you is a bit bigger because of the role that your parents have taken on. And having that to say like, hey, like if you feel uncomfortable in some place, like just tell us. Like, don't feel like you need to be there. Don't feel like you have to do certain things just to be like perfect or to be a kid. Like, you're a kid, be a kid. Like, go play in the mud. Like, go sleep over at your friend's house. Like, I don't know. I don't have any good examples, but it's like, be a person, live.
Shouldn't that actually be, you say, vocalize it as in the pastors, as in man and wife,
right?
As in mom and dad. But maybe we should take it even broader, vocalize it as a church, as a church, at least talk about it as a topic, at least make it a topic,
right?
That it does exist.
Yeah.
And don't try to, I'm not saying that we're hiding it, or we're not hiding it on purpose, I guess. So shouldn't that be a thing? Just get it more in the open. It's a topic, and it's part of the gig. It's part of the job. It's a part of being a Christian and being a church.
Yeah, I agree. It should be one of those things that's just like part of any other conversation, right? And it's not necessarily to say that it's alluding to pastors' kids wanting to be mischievous or anything. It's just let it be. Let's talk to each other. Like, even when you talk to a pastor, like, don't look at the pastor as if he's like holier than thou. Like, he's shared an amazing sermon, thank God for that, and it's convicted you. That's good. But like, it's, I remember talking about this with someone. I can't remember if it was you, Martin, but talking about like clapping after like a sermon. Oh, this subject, it's like, it's almost like we've adopted that like classroom mentality to say, oh, you read a nice like passage from the book, like, well done. And like when pastors preach in church, it's like there's this accolade, like this, like the well done. But like, who, like, are you thanking the pastor or like God, who's led the pastor to preach this sermon that is supposed to convict you? And they're doing what they're supposed to do as a leader. And it's like, don't look at the pastor as that. Like, you're supposed to weigh whatever preaching he's sharing with the word of God to check its accuracy. And that puts him in his place of humaneness. Said it's a person. He can make mistakes, even talking about like preaching of the word of God. And like, so don't put that pressure on him, expecting him to be perfect in his like sharing off the word. And in the same way, don't put that pressure on anyone else in the church.
And that's a great end for our podcast. I want to say thanks to all our people who are listening. Please do like, subscribe, follow, or whatever, and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Missionaries podcast. For more information about this podcast and how you can help us, visit www.me.pel. God bless, and keep up the great work for His glory.